Okay, well, I'm just going to kick off the webinar and just introduce everyone. So joining us today for the webinar will be Katrina Walton, who is the Director of Wellness Designs. So welcome to you. Also Cash Thompson, who's the Director and Psychologist Consultant at Yes Psychology. And also we'll have John Rutherford with us, who is the General Manager for EgoWorks, Physiotherapy and Consulting. So for Katrina's built a reputation as a pioneer of workplace wellness. She has over 25 years on-the-ground experience in the development and implementation of multi-award-winning wellness and human capital solutions for small to large organizations across the globe. Katrina is a sought-after speaker and trainer, having presented throughout Australia, Europe, and the United Kingdom, including the adjunct lecturer with the Centre for Environment and Population Health at Griffith University. Cash is a psychologist with 25 years of diverse experience in the field of psychology, including training, organizational consulting, program development, clinical therapy, and management, with expertise in critical incident management, employee assistance program, and manager support. He and his team have supported workplaces through natural disasters, change and challenge, and currently leaning in to provide expert advice and support to leaders and workplaces dealing with the impact of the COVID-19. John is a passionate health professional with qualifications in both physiotherapy and ergonomics, with 20 years experience providing health and wellbeing solutions to organizations of all sizes across Australia, the UK and Middle East, promoting digital innovations that allow large-scale implementation of health solutions is a key interest area for John, which has been particularly relevant in recent years and with such a strong global push towards flexible working policies. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Katrina and wish everyone an enjoyable webinar, and I'll see you at the other side. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan, for the warm introduction and for the opportunity to contribute to the Safe Step webinar series. So my name is Katrina. I'm founder and director of Wellness Designs. We're a boutique workplace wellness business that specialises in strategic consultancy, speaking and training services across Australasia. We're very privileged today to be joined by two of our friends of Wellness Designs and trusted associates, Cash and John. And firstly, what a response to today's webinar, a global turnout, I think, with over 1,200 registering across Australasia and also as far as Canada. So wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces around the virtual table today, including a number of our clients and practitioners, but also to those that were meeting for the first time, a warm wellness welcome. And I think as today's turnout reflects, worker wellbeing has just become the undisputed leadership challenge globally. Within Australia, many of us are probably feeling like we've already run a marathon in 2020, you know, with extreme bushfires, with the drought, and also now as we navigate COVID-19. So we're feeling certainly, I would suggest, very fatigued, very hypervigilant, and also uncertain at the times that lie ahead. And it was very timely, and I'll share with you now a report that was released by ARI this week, together with the Wellbeing Lab. And they'd actually surveyed workers in December last year around just to look at what are some of the early impacts around wellbeing as we navigate COVID-19. And what they found is that 81% of workers were feeling that there was an increase in the level of struggle, that 91% were really feeling anxious about the economy, that 82% were feeling anxious about the impact of COVID-19, not just for their families, but also within their workplaces, and that 76% were very uncertain about also what actions to take at work. So that was actually surveyed again in the middle of March. So it would be interesting, you know, a few weeks further down the line, whether that had escalated further. So what we know is that how leaders respond during this time, not just in supporting the health and wellness of their people, but managing risk and also trying to maintain some level of productivity, will be a key determinant in not only how organisations pull through, but also how they will be remembered. So if you're joining us today, you might be a leader that's new to managing remote workers, whether they be workers on the road, still out in the field, whether they're geographically dispersed, or they're new to remote working in your team, and looking at how you can best support them, particularly in these uncertain times. Or you might be responsible for leading or managing employee health, safety and wellness within your business, and particularly dealing with an increased volume of workers that may now be working remotely. And in that case, well, you're certainly in the right place today. So we'll be drawing on the collective 70 years experience of today's panellists, and we're really looking to have real conversations as to how you can best support the health and wellness of your remote workers, which what for many is a new way of working, and what we would suggest is the new way of working into the future. So we're going to be sharing some practical examples of companies that are doing this really well. And given the limits today, what we're going to try and do at the end is really point you to some tried and tested resources. I don't know about yourselves, but there's that sense of overwhelm at all the information that's really coming at us at the moment. So we're going to try and help distill that for you, help point you to some really credible and practical tools that you can take and apply in your workplaces following the session. We'll also share with you at the back of the webinar some ways to further build your wellness capability within your organisation beyond this webinar also. And it'll include a special offer for those on the webinar today. So if you're looking for a one-size-fits-all approach or an off-the-shelf approach, this won't be the webinar for you today, but hopefully the start of many further conversations in your workplace. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. You will have the opportunity to ask some questions throughout. Well, I would preface this by saying, we've had over 1,200 registered today, and we're expecting a big turnout today. So what we'll do our best to curate some of those things to respond to. And at the end, we'll also leave you with some opportunities to continue the conversation with our panellists today, if we don't get to a specific question. And you'll also have the opportunity to chat with the organisers as we go through. So we just wanted to start really today's discussion and asking, particularly for those leaders, is this the first time you have managed remote workers? So we're just going to start our poll there. Oops, excuse me. So the first of our poll questions today, I'm just going to launch that now. So is this something that's totally new for your organisation? Or no, maybe you've had a limited arrangements in place or for a smaller percentage of your employees previously? Or no, your team are already working remotely. So if you can just jot that down now in the poll. And so if you're not, just checking that might be working. We've launched it, but doesn't seem to be coming through as far as responses. So let's look in the chat box instead then. Okay, it appears the poll might not have launched properly. So if you can just put A, B or C, and we'll just keep an eye on that chat box. Certainly look like, yeah, a lot of B's and C's coming through there. There certainly appears to be new ground for all of those that are on the call today. Fantastic. Okay, oh, here we go, the poll's coming through now, great. So 33% have had limited arrangements in place, so option B there, and 67%, so the large majority. Okay, fantastic. So the team has worked regularly remotely. Okay, no, that's great. So for certainly many, this remote working is new, and as a small business owner with a team of remote workers, this is the way we've always worked. We deliver our services virtually. But it's also remembering that, for a lot of employees, this is very new, and it's a period of disruption, it's a period of uncertainty. And whilst new for many, we would argue that this is the new future of work. And there was a report that was released by Safe Work Australia and CSIRO back in 2016, looking at the 6 megatrends that are really going to influence safety and wellness in the years to come. And they highlighted the likes of the gig economy, a disruption with technology, with an ageing workforce, and also a shift in employment patterns, and also the impact of AI on workplaces. And so certainly they suggested there that rightly, I I think for a lot of companies, rightly or wrongly, they may have felt that remote working wasn't an option, for their employees, where they might have asked for such flexible arrangements. But what we've found in recent weeks is companies have very quickly, had to put those arrangements in place. So certainly, to quote Simon Sinek, it's a real opportunity for us to adopt an infinite mindset, a forced opportunity for us to change maybe our previous thinking, and a real opportunity to look at how we can best work as a team with the future of work. And this is a quote that was drawn from that CSIR report that I mentioned, and it recognising that with this future work, that new technology and ways of working will certainly introduce challenges from a workplace health and safety and workers' compensation point of view, but will also really have a lot of opportunity to make the work safer, and I suggest a lot of other opportunities as far as flexibility. So I'm just going to pause there and throw it open to our panelists, John and Cash, for any further comment around that.
Yeah, look, Katrina, just to add a little bit in there, it's obviously a lot of rapid change occurring, and while I think there'll be lots of organisations and teams who are rising to that challenge, there's others who will be still finding their groove. And it is a great opportunity to learn and to rehearse what the future could look like. But at this stage, with the massive amount of change and new habits to be formed, it's going to be a little bit messy. So I think it's about that perspective that how it's happening right now will be different with planned change and technologies that are rolled out in a very programmed way. But I think we're going to see some really interesting learning, and it's a very steep learning curve for leaders.
Right. Thanks, and John?
Well, look, that CSIRO article is actually quite an interesting one, because it looked at trends over the last period of time and predicted those based on modelling for how much people are adapting to flexible working and working from home, those current trends. And so what they projected would have been based on a very traditional growth of that, whereas we've just seen in the last little while, there's such a huge expansion. Everyone's forced into these working from home arrangements that some of the predictions will actually increase a lot faster than what that CSIRO article or report predicted. And some of the major concerns, I guess, from a physical health perspective are their concerns around the sedentary nature and rising screen time, the blurring of those boundaries between work and home, and those key mega trends will become very, very relevant given the current climate.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, we're certainly starting to see some of those challenges play out now. So I just wanted to, before we launched into our 5 key ways, just to revisit what does a healthy workplace mean? So hopefully that's given you all a good chance to read that definition. So I guess it's just highlighting that no matter where the work location, that again, supporting health and wellbeing is more than just about physical wellbeing. It's how we support the psychological, the social, the financial, wellbeing at an environmental level of our people. And what you would also notice there is that onus on that sense of autonomy as well. So this is certainly the approach that we adopt in our training, and recognising that we spend a third of our life at work. So the workplace does play a really important part in our health and wellbeing, particularly at this time where a lot of those lines are blurred. Okay, so we're going to now move on to the first of our 5 key ways about the importance of leaders themselves being well to lead well. So certainly leaders, particularly through these times, wellbeing is critical for them to be healthy, resilient, and high-performing leaders. A lot of us are having to dig deep as leaders, particularly those as business owners, going through a real time of financial uncertainty and having to make some really difficult decisions to navigate our way through. The second thing that we know is that a leadership style and behaviour impacts not only on their job satisfaction of the employees, their workplace-related stress, their adoption of healthy behaviours, and also their participation in wellness efforts. So we know that leaders well and truly are the wellness barometer for organisations. So I might hand now to John or Cash for their thoughts around that principle as well.
I see John give me the nod there to go first. Look, it's really, really important for self-care. And self-care in practical terms is activities and routines that a leader can put into place to be well and ready to respond. I use the term tactical composure in these times. It's the ability to use preparation and composure techniques to be able to deal with things that are going to be challenging and repeating themselves, or things that aren't going to change in a quick manner. So on a day-to-day basis, there are things like making sure that leaders do exercise and look after their own well-being, take regular breaks to get clean air, which is that ability to really think clearly, plan and even maybe rehearse what to say or do when you're about to have challenging conversations. This is particularly important at the moment because of emotional contagion and the levels of anxiety that team members will be feeling. So if a leader engages in self-care, they're more likely to be well, to be patient, to be very present. And that's really helpful when you need to listen fully, especially to the people who are having emotional situations, or perhaps impacted in very significant ways by the impacts of COVID-19. Also, too, when you're able to be present and well, you're more likely to be open and be authentic, perhaps even have a bit of vulnerability and talk about how things are impacting you. That's a great leadership tool that encourages your people, your direct reports, to respond to you, perhaps even brief up, and to normalise the idea of that there will be hassles from time to time. That self-care also is really important for the fact that there's extra demands on leaders, on everyone at the moment, and there is a real risk of compassion fatigue and burnout.
Right. Thanks, Cash. And John?
Yeah, look, taking some of that and adding the physical health spin onto it. I mean, Cash did mention taking the time for exercise, and if you look at some of the autobiographies out there, or some of the things that are written about great leaders of our time and of times gone by, and one of the really recurring themes is that real discipline to make time for exercise and to make that a priority in the day. And so if we're able to do that, to lead that way, to show that, then you can give some of yourself to the team, and you can't do that from an empty tank. And we know that physically there's just so many proven strategies and proven outcomes from good, healthy habits. And so mentally, it helps you to think more clearly. There's that clean air that you were talking about, Cash. There's the long-term sort of protective effects of exercise against there's a recent article around Alzheimer's and avoiding the long-term impacts of other mental health conditions. Physically, it stands for itself that there's so many guidelines out there about looking after yourself. And the important point in all of this is that it's not a linear relationship between the amount of exercise and the outcomes. So people who don't do much exercise right now are actually in a position to get the most benefits from just doing a little bit. So to go from none to some is actually some of the greatest benefits seen. To go from some to more is also incredibly powerful. But it's really not a linear relationship. Yes, more is better when it comes to exercise, but it certainly is important to just do what you can to really make it a discipline so that you can continue to provide that support, and encourage your troops, encourage the people that are working with you to do the same thing, because leading from the front, leading by example, is really important.
Great, thanks, John. And there's some great role models there as leaders, the likes of Richard Branson. He's known for his walking meetings. And I've one colleague, they're having walking meetings with their team this week, where they're on the phone as they do a lunchtime walk. Barack Obama is another great example. And John Howard, I think we all have fond memories of him walking around in his Aussie tracksuit. So thank you to you both. So we'll move now on to tip number 2. So it's how, as leaders, do we enable the health and wellness of our remote workers? And before I hand back to John and Cash for their thoughts, I just wanted to also frame this as part of a broader and results-orientated health and wellness strategy for your business. Because certainly there's some immediate parameters that we are needing to put in to set up to work productively and safely in a remote working situation. But we need to be thinking 6 months, 12 months down the track, and more broadly as to how we can support the health and wellness of our people. And this is the model that we use both with our consultants and within our consultancy, and with our training, which is aligned to the World Health Organization approach. And that first step is about having a really good sense of what are the key drivers for the business. What is the business imperative for investing in the health and wellness of our people? And how does it align to and support our organisational goals. And obviously there's some immediate drivers at the moment as we navigate this next few months together. But thinking about, how does this support us in being an employer of choice, in managing an ageing workforce, in attracting and retaining top talent, as some examples. And the second step is, how do we determine what are the needs for our business? What are the risks, the costs of not doing anything? What are the interests of our staff? And actually taking time to ask our people what is it they want, how can we best support them? And that will then determine the priorities for our strategy to ensure that where we're spending our precious time, money and resources are in the right place. And that will then guide the next step, which is the design phase. So whether it be workers that are still out in the field currently, whether it be workers that are working remotely for an interim period, or more broadly, to ensure, again, we have a targeted strategy that's going to get the best bang for the buck, so to speak. And then the fourth step is engage. So how do we engage our people in that journey? Our fellow leaders and managers, but also the employees themselves. And that could be, site or department-based champions that help to provide that support and encouragement and motivation, for their peers at that grassroots level. And then step 5 around the monitoring. So how do we actually then measure the impact of the strategies that we're implementing? And there was a study that was done by Bupa a couple of years ago where they surveyed workplaces that were investing in workplace health and wellness. Yet only 12% were actually measuring the impact of those strategies. So again, is it any wonder come budget time, sometimes these things can be questioned if we can't demonstrate that value back. And then some very important in the current climate, how do we sustain, how do we keep it meaningful, relevant, how do we embed it so it does become part of business as usual? So I just wanted to frame that before I then head back to John to talk about what are some strategies as a leader that we can adopt at a physical wellness level. So over to you, John.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is certainly something that we do on a daily basis with a whole lot of our clients all around Australia. And most people are aware there's that legal obligation to provide a safe and healthy workplace. And the question here is that what is reasonably practical when you take that to a remote working environment? So that's the conversation that really needs to be had internally, and then that will inform some of the content within this framework, within that policy that you're talking of, Katrina. So people need to first of all understand what their position is, like how much detail are they going to go into when it comes to setting up the physical workplace. So it is really a case-by-case basis. There isn't one size fits all approach. I wish there was. It would make it really easy for everybody. But what we're finding, for example, if I just take an example of 2 comparable organisations, both private health insurers in Australia who we support with some ergonomic assistance, one group will every year send out an individual from our team to go and do a risk assessment of each of their home workers to physically be there and conduct a face-to-face ergonomic assessment. And that's their model, that's their process. Another organisation, another private health insurer, they have a large subset that work from home regularly, and we'll go out there, not physically, but using online tools to provide the service with an online risk assessment for them instead. So there's different ways of doing this. It really depends on what your company policy is. And the ergonomics is really what we're trying to set up here when it comes to the physical environment. And the main 3 things that as leaders you can ask from an ergonomics perspective, as number 1, is there a dedicated workspace for this person to work from? So is it a makeshift arrangement, or do they have somewhere that they can set themselves up at for a length of time? So, and that will help you to understand what compromises you may or may not need to make in terms of their setup. So not just from ergonomics perspectives, but also from the noise and light and all the other parts of a workplace that we could take for granted when we're working from home. But understanding that is a key part for a leader, for your team members. But number 2, the second biggest question to ask is, or big question to ask is, what are they sitting on? So when they're working there, because let's face it, it's often a very sedentary role working from home, and the amount of time you spend seated needs to be comfortable. And if people are sitting on makeshift arrangements on a dining room chair or lounging around in the lounge room with their feet up on the coffee table, this kind of posture is fine for short periods of time. But if it becomes the norm and that's what you're doing for the next 3 to 6 months, then it could lead to all kinds of other problems. And so you may need to look at that in a bit more detail before it becomes an issue. And the third ergonomic tip, or the third ergonomic question that I would encourage leaders to ask is, what height is your screen? And it seems such a simple question, but we know there's a massive body of evidence to say that people who are using a laptop directly, they put a lot more load on the neck and shoulders, the physical load is much higher, and there's such simple strategies you can do. And it doesn't mean getting new screens, just a simple laptop stand, something to prop that screen up into a higher position can be a real game changer for somebody's comfort, especially when they're doing it for day on day on day. So it's 3 simple questions. Have you got a dedicated workspace? What are you sitting on, and what height is your screen? And it's something we've been doing for years as well. The screen height is such a big issue, and companies who are quite forward thinking in this, companies that I'm thinking of that we support like Deloitte and KPMG, they've had policies for years where their remote workers who are out at client sites or working away from the main offices are provided with these little laptop packs consisting of a stand, a keyboard and mouse, so that they can comfortably set up their laptop to be used anywhere in a much more ergonomically friendly way. So these kind of organizations have been doing it for years. It's really a bit of a business as usual thing now to shift to a working from home arrangement. But for other companies, it's a bit of a steep curve now to get on board. But it's something that we've been doing for a while. 3 simple questions from a leader's perspective. Ask those things and you're on your way.
Great, thank you, John. And then Cash, on to you from a mental and social wellness standpoint. What are some strategies we can adopt there for leaders?
Yeah, look, if I'm looking at what leaders can do, that's going to make the biggest difference here. There's 2 tools I'm going to just briefly run through. One's proactive and one's reactive. Both will help look at what's needed for individuals and help them thrive. So the first of all is, this is the time for all leaders to have training or brush up on their skills on the 3 R's. So that's how to recognise signs of concern or trouble or mental health issues, or even domestic violence, signs of domestic and family violence. Secondly is to respond in a supportive way, which I'll tell you how to do in a tick, and then refer to supports like the Employee Assistance Program. One of the best things leaders can do in this time to help with your those 6 stages, Katrina, also, is to provide regular individual check-ins with their people on a weekly basis, and perhaps smaller check-ins a couple of times during the week. Face-to-face through video chat is great, or by phone, and this has serves a number of purposes. In the check-in, we encourage maybe 5 or so questions that a team can collaborate with their leaders and say, these are the 5 questions that our leaders are going to ask us each time, so we can prepare our answers for those. Things like, how are you going? And that can be, how's the day going, how's work going? But how are you going? What's been going well? So what went to plan based on our last chat? What's going good? Third, what's bothering you or is a hassle to you? And then you have a talk about that. Fourthly is, what are you doing to put something in place to manage that hassle? What strategies are you putting in place to get that accountability and that forward thinking and solution focused approach? And then fifth, what is it that I can do as a leader or a colleague to help you right now, to meet the needs? What are your needs I can meet right now? So that structured check-in is able to pick up on early issues that might be occurring. It's a great way of doing servant leadership, which is great for when you have a diversity of people, you're including people and individuals. You can ask, what is it that I can do to help you flourish and thrive, perform well and focus? During that time though, I'd say extend the conversations regularly so that you can observe the behaviour, body language, tone of the person you're talking to in your team. You may then pick up on signs of stress or mental health concerns. Now, in the pack of tip sheets that we're providing there will be a checklist for those signs to look out for, but the conversation itself is gold. And the other thing that it does is it looks out of the 8 psychosocial risk factors. Suddenly, everyone's moved to a different workplace. We're looking here at what could occur here for workload, looking at how change is managed, a sense of being included, and a sense of belonging. All these things can help to be managed by those check-in conversations. Now, the second part is the reactive part and the supportive part. There'll be more times when you and your people are dealing with frustrated or anxious customers and also colleagues. So there's going to be emotion that spills over into conversation. And that might even be around checking in on someone's mental health. And for a lot of leaders, it's like, oh, is this too sensitive? Do I have the right to ask? And it is an obligation for for leaders to ask some direct, open questions in an open way. So what I've got in the tip sheets that will come out, and I recommend, is a simple method called the LEADS method. LEAD stands for listen, empathise, ask, discuss steps. Very quickly, as a script, it's like this. So when the person starts to describe something that's a difficulty for them, or it's a concern or complaint, then listen with your full attention. Tell them and show them that you're listening. This helps to start the diffusing process. Then empathise with very simple words. You don't have to agree with the situation, but just empathise. Next is ask questions. What is it that you need? What did you expect to happen? Do you mind if I run through some ideas? So the asking questions has the other person starts to answer it, and it activates the control centres of the brain versus the stress centres of the brain. Then discuss steps. So have a two-way discussion on things that can be possible. We start to problem solve and get into opportunity finding here. Therefore, the solution normally comes out of the conversation. And then steps is, what is it that we can do right now? What will you do? What will I do? And always follow up later on. So when in doubt, when there's an emotional conversation, when you're panicked and not sure what to do because someone's crying, because they've just found out some terrible news as a result of the coronavirus, then use LEADS. Listen, empathise, ask, discuss steps. And if you focus on these leadership behaviours, it'll actually track you through an emotional conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cash. Love those structured questions, some really practical tips there. And a comment from John, a comment from Lisa, John. I love the idea of that working from home pack. Fantastic. So really practical and tangible example there. Thank you. And moving on to another two dimensions of wellness now, financial and career wellness strategies, and just to talk to those briefly. And certainly, my belief is financial wellness has been traditionally a really overlooked and such a critical component of an effective and comprehensive health and wellness strategy. Financial wellness is actually defined as a state of psychological wellness in once we feel that we have control over our current finances and financial future. And certainly at the moment, that's an area where we're, no doubt, a lot of us are grappling with large market drops, employees either losing jobs or being stood down, a lot of SMEs in financial stress, and that financial hardship and crisis is very real. So there's some practical support mechanisms such as the EAP. There's some wonderful online financial wellness solutions that are available in the corporate market, such as Map by Plan, Money 101 as some examples there that might potentially be valuable. And there was actually a survey that was done by Map by Plan a couple of years ago now, looking at the financial fitness of working Australians. And what they found at that time is that 1 in 3 workers' personal finance was a major source of stress. That concern about finances was keeping approximately 26% of us up at night. And at the time, 36% of working Australians could only access 1,000 or less in an event of a financial shock, or in this instance, a pandemic shock. So that's certainly very concerning. It is a really worthwhile and valuable report to read, and encourage you to check out some of those support mechanisms. Also from a career wellness point of view, I know we're having some real conversations with clients now where things are starting to settle a bit. I think we're come to the realisation this is going to be a bit of a marathon, so to speak. And therein lies a potential opportunity for us to upskill and develop our teams over this period. So again, career wellness, there might be some opportunities to really position your staff strongly, as we come out the other side, to really hit the ground running, furthering their careers. So moving now on to tip number 3 around educating and empowering your team. So, and this is one of the key reasons that we developed our training academy, was recognising the importance of building that internal wellness capability of your leaders, but also those that may be responsible for developing and leading wellness strategies within your business, a wellness manager or equivalent, and also at that grassroots or general employee level. So again, I'm going to now share some practical tips for the team. I'm just going to talk to more effective time management and productivity tips, and then we're going to share, hand to again John and Cash, to share some perspectives from the physical and emotional standpoints. But certainly from a productivity point of view, and probably drawing on some of our experiences as a small business owner as well, I'm certainly a big fan of Dr. Adam Fraser's work around the third space. If you haven't read that book, I really encourage you to pick it up. particularly in this period where those work and life lines are really blurring, and how we can best transition or best manage those transitions between our work and home life. Another great resource is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, and he really speaks about that Pareto principle, is where the reality is for many of us, our time, maybe less available, where we're juggling work and home, where we're eating the biggest, ugliest frog, as he terms it, at the start of each day, more those mission critical tasks that we really need to be concentrating on. There's been a lot of talk in social media about those Pomodoro sprints, where we're doing condensed and focused blocks of time, where we've got social media turned off, we've got our phone turning off, and again, we're just focused on one single task and getting that done effectively. And I think also recognising, how our energy best works. I know for myself, I'm certainly a morning person, and that's where I try and structure my more focused tasks each day, leaving other more mindless things to the end of the day. So I guess it's knowing yourself how you work best and trying, where possible, to structure your day accordingly. And certainly with your teams as well, at a practical level, something that we've been doing as a team for a number of years now that's worked really well is having set times over the week that are dedicated for meetings, and then for more focused time. And that's even more important at the moment, where you might have staff that are offline or unavailable for certain periods of the day, where they might be juggling home or schooling responsibilities. So having set office hours or similar, where as a team you can come together. And I know we've introduced this week for our team, where virtual coffee hour, where I just have Zoom open. If you want to drop in for a coffee, a virtual walk by, just to again make yourself available for that. So I might hand over then to John, just for some practical tips from your side, John, about how leaders can provide practical strategies, and pass on to their team.
Yeah, great. Look, the first thing is to just check in, and I'm sure this is something that is going to keep coming up as a theme, but check in with the staff that you're looking after directly, and make sure they are taking a couple of minutes to get themselves set up comfortably in their space. So from a physical perspective, it can be tempting to just jump on the lounge, get on with it, bang out some emails quickly because someone's waiting for something to come back from someone else and you want to be quick, but that's not healthy. And if you're doing that over and over again, it's going to have an impact on your health, on your comfort. So take the few minutes just to check in, make sure everybody else is doing what they should be every time they're sitting down to do some work. And that's going to increase the tolerance of time they can be in one position before their body starts to tell them to fidget and move. So be aware of that. If people are bouncing all over the place like this during a Zoom meeting and they don't seem comfortable, I mean, there might be something that could be improved there to try and optimize their setup. So, or maybe it's just time to take a break and go for a walk. So that's the first thing. But I mean, arguably the biggest issue from a physical perspective with working from home is the fact that it can be such a sedentary role, and we can spend so little of our time moving when we're within the confines of our own house. I've been working from home for 3 years predominantly, so this is not a new thing for me in any way. And I can tell you that on some days I don't do well. Like, I don't do the physical stuff as well as I should, and as well as I know I should. But if it's really just trying to be extra disciplined to do the little bits right. And a few stats, a few interesting articles. There was an article last year that was published and talked about how much we actually have to move to be able to reach those thresholds, to be able to do what we need to do to reduce our chronic health condition risk. Things like the arthritis, the asthma, the back pain, the lung conditions, the heart disease, diabetes, all these kind of things. They're chronic health conditions that are rampant in Australia. Like, it's our biggest problem. And you can avoid and offset a lot of these with some decent exercise. And what it comes down to is a few magic numbers, which I'll throw at you. Number one, 24. Okay, 24 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity is enough to meet the guidelines, whether you're looking at the WHO guidelines or whether it's the Australian guidelines. To meet the physical activity guidelines, 24 is your magic number. Now, technically, if you take 150 minutes, which is the moderate level of exercise that the guidelines say, and break it over 7 days, it's 21 and a half minutes. But I'm referring to a particular article that found that 24 minutes is optimal or enough to meet those obligations. So there's your number, 24. Make time for 24 minutes of decent exercise during the day, and you'll be on your way to offsetting some of the health risk. But when you think about health risks for workers from home, think of it as a coin. The coin has the two sides to it. So physical health is one side, but the fact that you're sedentary is the other. And these are two very distinct but related variables. And just because you do physical activity for 24 minutes doesn't mean that if you sit in one spot for 9.5 hours a day, you're going to offset your risk completely. So there's two things to do. One is to break up the periods through the day to do light activity and move around. And the other is the 24 minutes at least of physical activity. Now, I said before, it doesn't need to be 24 minutes. Anything is better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about some of the research that's out there. And if you're interested in seeing some of these links, some of this research, do hit me up. I'm happy to share all that stuff. The more knowledge everyone has about this stuff, the better. So 24 minutes is your magic number there. Good things that leaders can ask: check the ergo setup, get the incidental movement, and make that 24 minutes a day. Very simple.
Great, thanks, John. Now, we've had a few interested in that article, so we'll look to share that. And also, can the 24 minutes be broken up during the day? Asked Jan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's broken up over the week, technically. A lot of people are asking this. In fact, if you wanted to just do light exercise, if you wanted to light movement, if you wanted to consider vacuuming your floor, things like that as light activity, that can substitute for some of those 24 minutes, but it just takes a lot more of those minutes to accumulate the same risk reduction. It's actually around 375 minutes of vacuuming, or 325 minutes if it was vacuuming, over the course of the day would be enough. But no one's going to vacuum for 5.5 hours. But little things that you do through the day does break up that load, does break up the risk. You can break it up across different activities, but the simplest way, let's be efficient with this, give it 24 minutes of dedicated time. Everything else just adds to reducing your risk.
Great, thanks, John. And thanks, Susie. Yes, a good excuse to start vacuuming. Fantastic. Okay, moving on to Cash. Cash, are you able to share some practical tips that leaders can impart for their teams?
Yeah, a good example is vacuuming going to reduce your stress, or is it going to cause some stress? We're all so beautifully different, aren't we? Look, I'll try and be focused here on what the science or the evidence is showing that helps people at work, wherever they are, to focus, also stay calm, and to be more productive. And what we were trying to do, especially in the environment now where our brain is going off on tangents, thinking about all the impacts of the coronavirus and what could happen next, our emotional brain is triggered. We're in that worry mode and going around in circles in our head. We want to be able to activate the control centers of the brain, which means we can be more deliberate and planned. So activities that we can encourage all team members to do are having a structured routine with flexibility and lots of little breaks. In those breaks, of course, to rethink and recheck what's needed, priorities, to look at solutions and look at what's going well. Activates also a sense of well-being from looking at what is going well. We want to focus people on being present in the moment. So this is the time, if you haven't already, to give mindfulness meditation a go. It's a superpower, has a lot of benefits to it, and something that you can build up over time, and it'll help you focus on purpose and what you need to do. The other things are very much problem solving. So writing down problems, concerns, or typing them out and looking at solutions that might work there. The idea of having some sort of mental focus also helps. So planning ahead, what is it that I'm focusing on today? What mindset am I going to carry into my day as well? And leaders can encourage it by saying, what strategies are you using? Do you have a plan? Have you written down the things that are happening in here out of your head onto paper so we can tackle them one by one? All in all, this helps give a sense of calm and control in a situation where we don't always have control of the uncertainties as well. So they're really good practical advice. And also, I'll triple endorse exercise. As a psychologist, I prescribe exercise for a lot of people. And in fact, it can be a treatment in itself for mild to moderate anxiety and depression.
Great. Thank you, Cash. And Cash, you had a little case study. Oops, you were keen to share with us as well from one of your clients. And thank you to Viola for allowing us to showcase this today. Yeah,
so this is just fresh off the press. Veolia have 1,000 of their people have been moved to working from home, and they have a range of frontline workers in waste and energy, and even some who are in remote centres of Australia who are right now in lockdown, those who can't leave their site to get home and vice versa. So they've put together a series of very compassionate and practical videos that are pointed at the direction of their people and their context, and they're due to be rolled out next week. As you can see, they're having a bit of fun. The one with working from home has my cat on the interviewer's lap because the cat kept coming in to the interview, but we just roll with that because that's life and things aren't always neat. What else? Veolia have a COVID response team, so they're putting together a protocol for how to deal with things as they predict they're going to roll out, even how to deal perhaps with grief and loss that might occur as a result of illness through COVID-19. We're providing practical strategies for that. They've got some tip sheets, which is on the next slide, which will go out to their working from home people and also to their leaders, which will provide an emphasis on looking at what opportunities can occur out of working from home. There's lots of little tips there that we've discovered, been through already. And also encouraging people to be able to see this as a rehearsal for the future of work as well. So they're looking at a mindset and a way of delivering their information in a very controlled way, starting from a message from their CEO, which was delivered last week. The other thing that Veolia are doing or have done in the past for 6 years that we've been working with them is for their FIFO, fly in, fly out and drive in, drive out workforces, having a programmed on-site or virtual wellbeing check-in program. So it's kind of like an opt-out program. Everyone gets an opportunity to talk with a professional about how life's going and give some tactical advice and perhaps more in-depth advice and strategies for things that are bothering them as well. It's a great way of getting a pulse of the team, but also helping people who are isolated.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cash. That's a great practical example. And I know, having followed Veolia's journey for a while, they've been investing in the health and wellbeing of their people for a long time, haven't they? So this is just another nice extension of that. Thank you. Okay, so moving now on to tip number 4. So how can we leverage technology to really optimize engagement and productivity and more broadly the health and wellness of our people? So what we'd love to hear now is if you can pop in the chat box, what productivity or engagement tools are you using, but particularly with good effect at the moment? What's working really well generally, but also in supporting the health and wellness of your people at this time? Just while we're waiting for some of those to come through, love the design of resources for Veolia. Great mix of visuals and text there, Cash. Fantastic. Okay, so some responses coming through now. So Microsoft Teams certainly proving popular. WhatsApp, great. Lots of webinar tools. Workspace. Google Meet, fantastic. Lots of Zoom. Wouldn't we love to have shares in Zoom at the moment? House Party, great. So it's more a social tool. Zoom. TikTok for fun clips, great. YouTube video from the CEO. Yes, that leadership messaging so important at the moment. Friday virtual drinks. I know we had one on Friday with our girlfriends. Fantastic. And Slack, great. So it looks like certainly everyone taking advantage, which you may have used before, but now using in a more creative way. So this is just a snapshot of some of the tools that are available, of which we have certainly a number of our clients using. Picking up the phone, having we have a quick stand-up meeting, at the start of the day. Workplace, Slack's some great communication tools there, including the likes of Yammer. Boxer is a great little one if you haven't heard of that, where particularly if staff are offline for a period, where you can start a conversation, a trail of conversation about a particular topic, and then the person can reply back at a time that suits them along that same train of thought. So that's a great little one we use within business. Teams, we have a lot of our clients using that with their champions networks as well with great effect. If you haven't heard of them already, Asana and Trello are some great project management tools. So we've been using Asana for a number of years with our team, and it's a great way to, liaise with other stakeholders that might be working on, say, a project with you that might be external to the organisation. A great way to cut down the emails, to keep everything contained in a nice, neat area, and just to sort of stop anything falling through the cracks, keep everyone on track. Loom's another great little one too we use, where particularly at the moment where you might not be in an office where you could pop over to speak to someone and they might not be necessarily available at that time, and rather than sending lengthy emails, you can just take a little video capture of or an explainer video and then send that across to them. So that's a nice little tool. There's a plethora of apps. We haven't, with time, unfortunately, won't have the opportunity to delve into the amount of wellness apps out there, but there's certainly a lot of credible ones ones, and I know John and Cash will talk to a couple in a moment. And obviously, live streaming, telehealth, there's a lot of other modes that can be used that companies were already using, but certainly I think with increased reach now. So we've seen lots of examples of that, of live streaming of yoga classes and the like this week on social media. Also some financial wellness platforms as well. We mentioned a couple of those earlier, and also wellness platforms where you can, brand it for your company. You can house a lot of your support services, again, in a nice, neat package. Typically, we found those, have been somewhat underutilized in the past. I think any of these tech tools are only as good as the marketing and comms strategy behind it, in our experience, but suggest we will see a much greater adoption in companies embracing this into the future. John, anything from your side you wanted to add there around some tech solutions?
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at a diverse workforce across many locations now, especially with working from home, we're looking at ways to provide that physical health. And so this week of all times, it's been in the pipeline for such a long time, but with the current climate, it couldn't be better. We've got a new app that we're actually promoting now called Track Active Me. And this app, you can see some details on our website. It's literally released this week in Australia. And it basically provides physical help in terms of physiotherapy for people in their home using artificial intelligence. So a chatbot assesses you, takes you through a diagnosis and some treatment, provides a program and adapts that as you improve. It also has proactive measures. It has yoga and Pilates, all these other strength and conditioning type things. And you can do it from your own home. It's all safe and evidence-based, but it's called Track Active Me. But if you have a look at our website, we're actually doing some promotions on it. So it's been a much more cost-effective way to get our little discount codes. So come through us, please, and we'll show you how to optimize that in this time as well.
Great. Thanks, John. And Cash, any tools there you'd particularly recommend?
Yeah, just quickly, for any of your people who might be experiencing anxiety or depression, there's some great free online therapy or wellbeing platforms. So Mood Gym from the National Australia University, and My Compass, which is endorsed by Black Dog. They have some really great strategies. So people can pace themselves through evidence-based strategies to deal with anxiety and depression. Also for mindfulness, Smiling Mind has mindfulness activities for all ages, so including kids, and of course Headspace, which is a very popular one. Smiling Mind, the whole program is completely free.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cash. So we might move, and I'm just conscious of time, we might move into some questions now. And just probably to wrap up this section, this was actually a quote that was from a report on workplace wellness in Australia that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers close to 10 years ago now, just reiterating that we have to move from illness to wellness, that it's no longer the nice to have, it really is business critical. And as we said at the start, I think this will really be a determinant in how organisations pull through this time, and also how they will be remembered. And in the meantime, it's about how we keep it grounded, how we keep it real, and how, as leaders, we really demonstrate that heart-centred leadership, navigating not just through this next 6 months, but beyond. So we're going to turn now to a few questions, and we've been scanning some of the chat as we go, and we have received a few questions also prior to the webinar. And I think this first one is one that will hit home with a lot of those on the call today. It was one from Ben, who works in a government organisation out of Victoria. And his question was, do you have any hints on how to ensure you get a balance without the guilt between working from home and the needs of your family, childcare, homeschooling, especially when both parents have work that needs to be done? So certainly a big question, Ben, and one that a lot of us on this panel too are grappling with at the moment. And I think just to talk to myself briefly, and then I'll hand to Cash and John for comment as well. I think the one thing that athletes really miss when they retire is routine. I think for a lot of us, it's something we are really grappling with at the moment. As a small business owner, married to another, I think there's certainly some practical strategies that we've put in place over the years, and probably putting in place more at the moment, including creating and setting boundaries and having a really clear schedule as a family, and where you might have a tag team arrangement where one person in the household might work, say, a morning shift, come together of a lunchtime, and then the second person works the remainder of the day. Also managing energy, as I spoke to earlier, know when you work at your best and trying to again schedule your time throughout the day to maximise on that. I think at it from a parenting and children level, trying to plan age relevant activities. I heard a great tip during the week about even preparing lunch boxes for the day, to minimise disruption from kids coming up hungry. So I thought that was a great little practical tip, and arranging virtual social catch-ups for children as well to keep them occupied during the day. ABC School yesterday have made an announcement for term 2 about some great new education-based programs aligned to the school curriculum that they'll be launching in April. And also Thea O'Connor, who's one of our wellness colleagues, is also just introducing a great podcast series where she's interviewing working parents. So that will be a resource that'll be available in our hub that we'll talk to later. So they're just a few ways that I know within our household we're navigating at the moment. John, I know this is something you're grappling with a young family too. Anything you wanted to share there with some practical tips?
I mean, from a practical side, it's just being structured, isn't it? As you've already said there. So it's knowing that a bite-sized piece of activity can mean a lot to a youngster, and time is what they really want. And so if you can build that into your day, into your workflow, and just communicate with everyone who's in the household about it, then it becomes part of the routine. So it's really just planning it out and being disciplined. Good to get movement at the same time.
Fantastic. Actually, that's another great point, John, is I know something we've moved to, whereas individually might have gone out for a gym session or yoga class, now we're doing exercise as a family. So it's a nice way to connect together and still keep moving collectively. Great. Cash, anything else you'd like to add there, or if not, we'll move on to the next question.
Just quickly, and seeing a few things in the chat too, really about calibrating the right amount of work, what's reasonable, so there's no work overload as well. So again, what I'd suggest is through check-ins or through having a buddy system, a peer-to-peer mentoring system as well, calibrate what's the sort of work you need to do, create a to-do list, and then have a to-done list, which can help with motivation, saying these are the things I've actually achieved given what we're doing, and then have team members brief that up to their leaders to say, this is what I was trying to achieve, this is what I have achieved, and this is what I need to get to the next level. That can become a rolling conversation that leaders help to keep an eye on actual workload and potential for burnout.
Yeah, great point. Okay. And also I think it's coming together again as a team with the leader determining what are the really mission critical things, other things on our to-do list that just really aren't a key focus for us the next particularly 6 months. So it's really looking at those priorities, isn't it, as a team. Fantastic. And we've had another question come through from Anna, who works in the agricultural sector in Victoria. So a big shout out to Anna, asking how can managers check to see if their staff are being productive at home without encroaching on their motivation and feeling of self-worth? And also, how can a manager check in on a worker's mental health and wellbeing without blurring the lines of professionalism? And also, what is the limit to a manager's duty in regard to this? So some great dimensions to that question, Anna. Cash, is there anything you want to start with there?
Just quickly to endorse the things I've mentioned before about check-ins, having good check-in conversations, being open and saying, how are you going? At a time like this, people might be struggling. It's okay if you're not okay. And so move beyond that sense of the professional world and private world to think of a leader's responsibility. It's okay to ask questions. How's your energy? How's your concentration? How is your motivation going? I find that if you ask, almost all the time, your worker, your team member will tell you how it is. But you might have to do a second pass a couple of days later if you think they're not giving you the full picture as well. Send them the tip sheets, the leads model, and the information we've covered today is in those tip sheets. You can send that to your people and then get them to start monitoring themselves as well. So that when you have a helping conversation, not a mental health conversation, you have a helping conversation, you can ask those questions about how is your energy, how is your focus, are you sleeping okay at night, without having to diagnose, without having to be a psychologist or a counsellor. You can ask some good pointed questions and you'll soon determine whether there's an issue that requires support from the EAP.
Yeah, great. And Susie's just asked, as you're talking, Cash, as an extension, what if the manager is also not okay? As far as managing up potentially.
Yeah, look, of course, this is all about that self-care and about what I call peer-to-peer mentoring and calibration. So if leadership teams get together to ask those same questions with each other, then it's about being real. And I call this leading and engaging together so that you've got that sense of support. Also, a lot of employee assistance programs have a manager assist line or a manager support line, which a lot of managers I still find that they don't know about it, but it's an on-tap resource to call and get individual support and debriefing and ideas around self and others in terms of mental health and wellbeing. Great resource, 24/7, use it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cash. We might just talk quickly to one more question before we move to further support ongoing and some practical tips that we can leave you with and tools. We've had a question here from Mish, who's a HR advisor out of Queensland. And probably a question for you here, John. If an employer's given their employees checklists to set up desks, had employees send back photos of their workstations and provided recommendations, and the employee does not follow the recommendations and ends up submitting an incident form, such as headache, sore neck, where does the employer stand? And do you have any resources to help illustrate to employees how to set up their desk correctly, including different work zones? So again, another great question there.
Yeah, look, and it sort of leads to one of there's a few key barriers or potential problems from the ergo side, but to answer the question really simply, there's an ownership on an onus rather on the company to provide the guidance and the assessment, but there's also an obligation of the employees to follow up on that advice and to follow through with it. So we've got to treat people like adults here as well. So if you provided the information, they do have a responsibility to act on it as well. One of the barriers can be if the action requires financial investment by the employee and they're not happy or comfortable to do that. So the procurement strategy around ergonomic equipment and who's responsible for what, it's a very important piece to make sure is well documented in the company policy towards remote working, so that those sort of things are addressed right from the start, because that's one of the potential barriers to getting a good setup is someone, either the company or the person, really not wanting to make that investment for whatever reason.
Great, thanks, John. So we'll move on to then, just as far as a formal wrap, both John and Cash have generously provided some really practical fact sheets. So on the back of the webinar today, we'll just send a brief follow-up email with a link to these documents and also some further information for those that are wanting to further build internal capability around health and wellbeing. We have some free resources that are available on our website that may be of interest to you on how to develop a results-orientated and sustainable wellness strategy with our Workplace Wellness Success Guide. If you are looking at this time to really develop that network of wellness champions at a department-based level to really nurture wellness at that grassroots level this time, there's a great 7-step free guide there for you as well. And if you do jump on our website, we've also got further information regarding our training programs, which are on hold face-to-face at the moment, obviously, but we do have some virtual and online options available, including for leaders, our accredited practitioner training for those that are responsible for leading wellness within the business, and also champions training as well. So one thing I did also want to mention, we launched early in March, so good timing in a way, Australia's first knowledge centre for workplace wellness. So for those who are at the start of their wellness journey or further along the way, there really never is a better time to come together as a wellness community. And what we've tried to do is really curate best of breed tools, resources, including a dedicated section on COVID across the different wellness dimensions that we've mentioned today, as well as community forums and opportunities to connect with other like-minded workplace wellness professionals across Australasia. So we're doing an exclusive offer for the period of April, just to again try and come together as a wellness community for a free 30-day trial. So if you are interested, just stop by our website. We would love to see you join the conversation in there. And also, just to end up and wrap up, some other upcoming events that you might be interested in for furthering your professional development in this area. We actually have on Monday a Q&A blockbuster, which is a Hub member exclusive, where we'll be joined by the wonderful Jo Kidney from Kidney OHS, talking about what that new way of working looks like and what that means from an integrated safety and wellbeing perspective. So that's very much a question and answer session. We also have a webinar series which is ongoing, including on the 20th of April on the gentle art of buy-in, so how to really bring your leaders and other stakeholders on board, with Simon Dowling, who'll be our co-facilitator there, and on the 10th of June with the wonderful Thea Sophia O'Connor on menopause at work, often a very missing piece of wellness strategy. As I mentioned also, if you jump on our website, stay tuned for further details of our upcoming training programs, including some of our online offerings. So also we just wanted to leave you with, and this is just a very small snapshot, there's a more extensive list, as I mentioned, in our hub along a whole series of wellness topics. So everything from leaders to domestic violence to mental health and wellness to how to set up your workstation correctly. But these are certainly some ones I suggest would be a great starting point for you and your organisation, including the likes of ESSA. They've got some great, how to exercise safely at home, some great little videos there. Money Smart is the one I referred to earlier. And also for the small businesses on the line as well, your local Chamber of Commerce, I know here in Queensland have got some excellent resources for small business owners, including how to best nurture their wellbeing at this time. So hopefully today's session has provided some real inspiration and, most importantly, practical tips on how you can best support the health and wellness of your remote workers, particularly through these uncertain times as we navigate COVID-19 and beyond, as we move to the new normal way of working, but hopefully with even stronger and more connected teams on the back of it. And Cash and John, the best way for people to stay connected and continue the conversation with yourselves. So Cash, firstly.
Yeah, you've got my email there. Drop me an email. Very happy to answer all the questions that we didn't get to, that you're curious about. Things like the psychosocial risk factors, that 24/7 EAP concept. Always happy to field any questions. And of course, the tips and details about what we've spoken about today are going to be on your hub, Katrina. So all those tip sheets will be there.
Fantastic. And you, John?
Exactly the same. I mean, the email's there. LinkedIn is fine as well. So whatever's easiest for people. So more than happy to help. And the resources, including all the details about any of the services and products that we find useful, will all be through that material that you're planning to circulate. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, John and Cash, and a heartfelt thank you for joining us as our partners in crime today and as co-facilitators of today's session. Also, just to highlight, you will find Cash and John in the hub as well if you wanted to reach out to them and other like-minded workplace wellness professionals in the community. If we can support you further too in helping you develop results-orientated and sustainable strategy for your people, both as we hibernate for the next few months, but also beyond, we would love to chat further with you. So thank you again to SafeStep. I'm sorry we have gone a little bit over time, so I'll hand back
okay.
to Alan.
And thank you to you, Katrina, Cash and John, for sharing some great tips and advice on how to manage health and safety remotely. That's fantastic, and well-being. You've certainly given us some hope with regards to moving from none to some with the 24-minute routine, exercise routine. So we'll be applying that, I'm sure, as well as reviewing our working from home plans. So thanks for all those fantastic tips. Also, thanks to everyone that's shown up today and come along. It's really fantastic supported webinar, which is great. We'll reach out in the next week or so with the recording to share with everyone as well that's registered. Also, the Safe Step and the Next Step will be running another webinar series as well. So feel free to check out the Next Step or Safe Step website as well. We have another webinar coming up next Wednesday with Are You OK Board Director Graham Cowan, and he'll be talking about why resilience matters when working from home. So feel free to register for that too. It should be great. But again, thank you, Katrina, Cash and John. Fantastic webinar. So really appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.